Hi, and welcome to Nana Story. Today, we're going to listen to the story Hazel and Gretel, and we are going to play by drawing the story. So, the idea is this. Whatever you hear in the story, you paint. If today's stories had a forest, an animal, or something you found interesting, you draw it. Today, I'm going to use Play-Doh because I thought of the pebbles that Hazel leaves to make a trail. But you can use any material you like. You can use markers, paint, and collage, as you can see from other activities we have done. But remember to check with who is taking care of you before using anything that might make a mess. Okay? You are going to hear now the story, Hazel and Gretel. At the edge of a vast forest, a poor cabin made of tree trunks stood. It was the home to a woodcutter, his second wife, and his 2 children from his first marriage. The boy was named Hazel, and the girl Gretel. Life had always been hard in the woodcutter's house, but at that time, things had gotten even worse. There wasn't enough bread for everyone. "My wife, what will become of us? We will all starve to death, and the children will be the first." "There is a solution," said the stepmother, who was very selfish. "Tomorrow we will give Hazel and Gretel a piece of bread. Then take them to the forest and leave them there." The woodcutter didn't even want to hear of such cruel plan, but his clever and insistent wife managed to convince him. In the room next door, the 2 children had heard everything, and Gretel began to cry. "Hazel, what now? Alone in the forest, we will be lost and die," she sobbed. "Don't worry," her brother comforted her. "I have an idea." He waited until their parents were asleep, left the cabin, gathered a handful of white pebbles that shone in the moonlight, and hid them in his pocket. Then he went back to bed. In the next day, at dawn, the stepmother woke the children. "We are going to cut wood in the forest. Here is some bread for you." The 4 of them set off. The woodcutter and his wife went ahead, with the children following behind. Every 10 steps, Hazel dropped a white pebble on the ground, without anyone noticing. When they reached the middle of the forest, the stepmother said, "Hazel and Gretel, rest here while we go chop some wood for the fireplace. We will come back for you later." After a long wait, the 2 siblings ate the bread and, exhausted and weak, fell asleep. When they woke up, it was the middle of the night. There was no sign of their parents. "We are lost. We will never find our way back home," sobbed Gretel. "Let's wait for the moon to rise in the sky, and we will find our way home," her brother reassured her. When the moon appeared, the pebbles that Hazel had dropped along the path began to shine. Following them, the siblings managed to return to the cabin. Upon seeing them, their parents were astonished. In his heart, the woodcutter was happy, but his wife, as soon as they went to bed, said they needed to try again with the same plan. Hazel, who had heard everything, wanted to go out in search of more pebbles, but he couldn't because the stepmother had locked the door. Gretel was desperate. "How can we save ourselves this time?" "We will find a way, you'll see," her brother replied. At dawn the next day, the stepmother woke the children. and they set off to the forest again. As they walked, Hazel crumbled all his bread and his sister's, making a trail. This time they went even further from home, and when they reached a clearing, the parents left the children under the pretense of cutting wood, abandoning them. Hazel and Gretel fell asleep from hunger and exhaustion, and when they woke up, it was very dark. Gretel began to cry, but this time they couldn't find their way back home. The forest birds had eaten all the crumbs. They walked for a long time during the night, and after a brief rest, they walked the entire next day without finding their way out of the vast forest. They were so hungry that they ate sour berries and continued their way. When the sun set, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. The chirping of a white bird flying over their heads, as if inviting them, woke them up. They followed the bird and suddenly found themselves in front of a very cute little house. Curious, they approached and were amazed to see that the roof was made of chocolate, the walls of cake, and the windows of jelly. "Hooray!" shouted Hazel, and he ran to bite a piece of the roof, while Gretel filled her mouth with cake, laughing. Then a high-pitched voice was heard, shouting from inside the house. "Who is living on my roof and living on my walls?" Unafraid, the children replied, "It is the raccoons teasing you." And they continued to enjoy themselves to their heart's content. But suddenly, the door of the little house opened, and out came a very ugly old woman, limping, supported by a crutch. Hazel and Gretel were frightened, but the old woman gave them a broad smile with her toothless mouth. "Don't be afraid, children. I see you're hungry, almost destroying my house. Come in, I will prepare a little meal." The meal was delicious, and the soft beds prepared by the old woman for Hazel and Gretel were delightful, making them fall asleep happily. The poor children didn't know that the old woman was a witch who ate children. And to lure them in, she had built the candy house. Now she rubbed her hands in satisfaction. "They are in my power. They cannot escape me. However, they are a bit skinny. Something must be done about that." In the next morning, while they were still sleeping, the witch grabbed Hazel and locked him in a dark cellar. Then, with a shake, she woke Gretel. "Get up, lazy bones! Go draw water from the well, light the fire, and prepare a good meal for your brother. He's locked in the cellar and needs to fatten up a lot. When he is plump enough, I will eat him." Gretel cried in despair, but she had to obey. Every day she cooked the best food for her brother, and every morning the witch would go to the cellar. And because of her poor eyesight, she couldn't see beyond her nose. So she ordered, "Hazel, give me your finger. I want to feel if you have fattened up." But clever Hazel, instead of showing his finger, would stick out a chicken bone. The witch would get angry because despite of all the food, the boy seemed to be getting thinner. One day, she lost her patience. "Gretel, tomorrow morning light the fire early and put put some water to boil. Skinny or fat, I intend to eat your brother. I've been waiting long enough." The girl cried, pleaded, begged, all in vain. In the next morning, Gretel quickly put the cauldron of water on the fire, while the witch was busy lighting the oven, saying she was going to bake bread. But, in truth, she wanted to roast poor Gretel, and from Hazel she would make a stew. When the oven was hot enough, the witch said to Gretel, "Get in there and see if it is hot enough to bake the bread." But Gretel, who was also clever, understood and didn't fall into the trap. "How do you get into the oven?" she asked innocently. "Well, you are really a fool." And the witch stuck her head into the oven. Gretel quickly gave her a push, shoving her into the oven, and closed the door with the latch. And the wicked witch burned to the last bone. Gretel ran to the cellar and freed her brother. They embraced, crying tears of joy. Then, having nothing more to fear, they explored the witch's house. And how many things they found! Chests and more chests, full of precious stones and pearls. "They shine more than my pebbles," said Hazel. "I will take some home." And he filled his pockets with pearls. With her apron, Gretel made a bundle with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. They left the witch's house and ventured into the forest. They walked a lot. After some time, they realized that they knew that place. Once they had gathered firewood in that clearing. Another time they had collected honey from those trees. Finally, they saw the woodcutter's cabin. They began to run in that direction, flung the door open, and fell into the arms of their father, who, surprised, didn't know whether to cry or laugh. He had felt so much remorse since he had abandoned his children in the forest. How many horrible dreams had disturbed his nights! Every single piece of bread he ate got stuck in his throat. He already had separated from the bad stepmother who had forced him to get rid of the children. Hazel emptied his pockets, taking out the pearls he had kept. Gretel untied her apron and let a shower of precious stones fall to the ground. Now they no longer had to fear misery or hardship. And so, from that day on, the woodcutter and his children lived in abundance without any more worries. You can send us your drawings on Nena's Instagram @História da Nena. Bye bye!